Hello, and welcome to Leaderfolk, an inclusive look inside the Jewish community. I'm your host, Sara. I'm so happy to welcome our guest today, Miriam Kabakov. Miriam is the executive director of Eshel. She was also the editor of Keep Your Wives Away from Them, Orthodox Women, Unorthodox Desires, a collection of writings about the challenges and joys of LGBT Orthodox Jews, and winner of the Golden Crown Literary Award. Miriam's also currently a member of the first class of The Collective, which is a new initiative from the Jewish Women's Foundation of New York for female CEOs and Jewish organizational leaders. So welcome, Miriam. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I love to dive in with the Jewish journey question. So by that I mean kind of, who are you and where did you come from? And what is the journey that sort of brought you to the work that you're doing today with Eshel?
Wow. Okay. How much time do we have?
As much as you want.
So I have always been very entrenched in Jewish life from a very early age. My parents raised us up in an Orthodox community in New York City. And our lives were just intertwined, me and my siblings, with, the Jewish community around us, our synagogue, our day schools. And so I lived kind of although I was living in New York City, I was in a very small world of, my Jewish friends, my life. And so it all became very important to me. And I was very devoted to keeping my Jewish identity and my Jewish practice, as an Orthodox Jew, alive and well. And over time, growing up in a Jewish day school, it became clear to me that I was attracted to other girls. And I kept hoping and praying that would go away. And it never did. And, growing up like that, it just sort of was terrifying. And I was not really sure that there would be a future for me with the Jewish people, with my people. And I did a lot of seeking and soul searching and trying to sort of figure out what my life would look like and what my future would look like. I always felt very accepted by my family and by my parents, and I didn't think that they would ever reject me. And I also was learning in my Jewish day school that Judaism is something that we're meant to live by, and that, whoever you are as an individual, that's the way you're intended to be. And so our understanding of Jewish law and Jewish practice sort of had to encompass who you were as an individual. And so I wasn't really going to leave my Jewish world when I came out to myself, but rather over time, it took a while, but through finding other people like me in community, I was able to say to myself, there is a place for me in the Jewish world in traditional Judaism as a gay person. So I did not end up, I did not immediately start this organization. It was many jobs before this one. And I'd like to think that all of those jobs actually led me to this moment, and all of the things that I did in my life until now, and all the people that I met and the communities that I was a part of really led me to this point where I thought it was really important to help create an organization that was able to help people in the way that I really needed to be helped when I was coming out to myself. And so part of it was just informal networks of people that I met when I was coming out. And I've told this story a lot. It's in my anthology, but I was a student in Northern California. I was in college there, and I wasn't out to anyone really, but I met a group of women who were all gay, but they were all interested in becoming Orthodox, and some of them were converts, and they thought I was so cute. I was coming from Stern College, which is Yeshiva University's college for women. And I really needed them to teach me how to be gay, like be a lesbian, basically, and the culture, and what did I need to know, and how do I find other people so that I could feel like I had friends. And they wanted to know for me, like, how do I be an Orthodox Jew? So it was this really interesting little network that I was a part of in Berkeley. And one summer, I was going to Israel to visit family, and one of the women of this little group of women that I was friends with said to me, there's this new group that's starting in Jerusalem that I just heard about. You should go to this group. They're Orthodox lesbians. And I was like, oh my God, that's so great. Okay. So I went to Israel for a few weeks. And then the last week, I went to this meeting of women. And I walked into the room, and the first person that I saw was the woman who had interviewed me to get into Stern College. And I was like, oh my God, what are you doing here? And she was like, well, I'm doing here what you are doing here. And so it was like, it was so bizarre for me to like have this person in this place, and it just seemed very dissonant. And but in a certain sense, like that was when my world came together, and I was like, oh, if you're here and I'm here, that means that we need to be here together. And I ended up staying in Israel for 2 years after that, just being a part of this network of friends that I had just found. And it was like all of my identities falling into place in one place. And then eventually I went back to New York, and I got my master's in social work, and I started a similar group in New York City. It was called the Orthodox of New York. And through that group, I had met, hundreds of women like me. And then I was sort of involved in helping to form other groups that included trans people and men. And so I was pursuing my career as a social worker. I worked at the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing in like the most wonderful work environment that was a really a real team spirit of people who were working to help previously homeless, chemically addicted, mentally ill seniors find housing and stay housed. And during that time was really when this group that I was running flourished. It was sort of like this, evening thing that I did, which was really a fun part of my life. And then eventually I ended up working at a different place called Avodah, the Jewish Service Corps. And it was kind of the beginning of Avodah. And for 7 years I worked there. And what I really learned from Avodah was about facilitative leadership. So helping other people lead is as a way of being a leader yourself, so that it's not just about you pushing yourself out into the front of the room, but actually helping other people come forward and find their voice and be leaders. And I also learned a lot about community building through Avodah, and how social change only really ever happens in community. So it was these lessons that I learned from that experience of, just to explain a little bit more, Avodah is a service corps in America where people, mostly Jewish people, post-college live together in a house, and each goes out every day to work in the nonprofit setting in places that help fight poverty or help people in poverty. And then they come home at night, and then they are all living in a very kind of like diverse community for like different kind of people from different backgrounds, people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and also religious observance. And so sort of like helping. So my job was like to help the core members negotiate conflict. That was a big part of the job, because they clearly, were going to have conflict throughout the year. So I learned a lot about like the cycle of group formation and how, there's like the stages of groups, how they come together. And then like in the very beginning, it's kind of like a honeymoon period. And then when everybody starts to get to know each other, like sort of a certain time of year and the weather's getting colder, like November, December, then that's when the conflict arises. And then the job of the next stage of the group in the arc of a year is to like learn how to resolve conflict together. And then by the end of the year, they've like formed hopefully a nice cohesive group where they actually really know each other and they've been through a lot together. And that's how groups, come together and become solid in an ideal world. So working at Avodah taught me so much about working with people. Also at the West Side Federation, I learned a ton about working with people. And after Avodah, I actually met somebody and we got married, and she's an academic, so I ended up moving with her and her work. And we ended up living in the Twin Cities. After a few years of fellowships, she found a job in the near the Twin Cities. So we moved to Minnesota. And that is where I ended up. I had a totally different job that was like a fun thing that I did. I was the director of the Minneapolis Jewish Film Festival for 3 years. And it was a great way to like get to know the community and get to watch fun films and really get to know people and work with people to create this large event in the Twin Cities once a year. And so that was like a wonderful way to land in a new place. And during that time, I was invited to a conference in Northern California, back in Berkeley, where it all kind of started for me in my personal journey, by the Schusterman Foundation. And they wanted to convene all of the people that they could find who were leaders in their communities on being LGBTQ and Jewish. And so at this conference, it was like all the people that I had heard about and who had, been involved in this arena were there. And a new group was forming, which sort of came out of that conference. And that was putting together all the people who had worked on LGBTQ issues in the Orthodox community, very specifically. And I was asked to be one of the board members, like the founding advisory board for this new initiative through another organization called Miryam. And then it was very exciting because it was the first time that we had actually had funding to do what a lot of us had already been doing very informally. And sort of it was a moment of recognition, and it was also a moment of great opportunity. And so I was like, oh, wow, I have been working on this informally for many years in my life for personal reasons and also for communal reasons. But now I get a chance to really exercise all my muscles, everything that I had learned from working, at the West Side Federation, at Avodah, in the film festival, working with people who are very different from each other, learning about conflict and how do we actually come together as one. Because a lot of us who were on this advisory board of this new initiative had been working in different spaces, and now we kind of had to come together. Sort of a lot. We've been working parallel and sometimes in conflict, and now we were coming together to create a new thing. And, and also just this was very much close to my heart. And after a few years of being a project of this other organization, we decided that we actually needed to take the project and make it into a new organization. And that's how Eshel was born. And I think that I kind of stepped into a little bit of a leadership vacuum at that moment, but it was also sort of oh, this is what I wanted to be when I grew up, and here I am. So that's how I ended up being one of the leaders at Eshel. And I feel incredibly blessed because it's something I had been involved with for many years. I got to cut my teeth in other places to help me figure out, that this is what I wanted to do, but also that this is what I could do.
I want to raise up the ways that you kind of went from stepping stone to stepping stone, developing yourself personally and professionally side by side until they kind of intersected in this really beautiful way. I know from the other people that I've spoken to on the podcast that that seems like a very common theme. And given where I am on my journey with kind of figuring out what I want to be when I grow up, it's just very beautiful and reassuring to hear your story in the ways that it all converged in such a fulfilling way.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's true is that whatever you do to get you where you are is important. And I've never taken a point A to point B path, like a direct line. It's always been very circuitous and like kind of grabbing along the way new skills and new opportunities to learn, following my spouse, geographically around the country for her work enabled me to try new things out. And the first place we lived was in Seattle for 1 year. And at the University of Washington, I did a year-long course on program evaluation. And I use that today, like in, designing surveys and kind of surveying our community. And, I would never have done that had I not moved there for 1 year. And I had, I sort of like, seizing moments and, places that you're living and looking around and saying, what am I really interested in? Because in the end, it's all going to come out to your benefit. That's sort of how I think about my journey, that I knew that I had interests. I wasn't quite sure how they would play out. Another program that I was involved with was the Institute for Informal Jewish Education. There was something coming out of Brandeis University that sort of put a name to what I was doing in my life, which was not formal Jewish education, but informal. And so I was in the first cohort of this group, and it was like a lot of camp directors and, people who were doing things in synagogues that were not considered formal education. And, people were not so much, we didn't have a language so much then for what we had been doing. And that sort of gave us language for it. And also, raised it up as like a valid way to engage people Jewishly in a really, really important way. And this was like before the study they did, I think it was before the study on how important overnight camps are.
I'd love to dig in a little bit more specifically to your work at Eshel and just give you an opportunity to brag a little bit about the incredible work that you're doing and the kind of breadth of programming that you offer. I find it so exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very exciting. And it's kind of like whenever we start a new thing, we sort of, see it flourish in a really beautiful way. And we see people who need what we're doing. And that's always really gratifying and reassuring that what we're doing is important. So I can talk about a few things that we're up to now, which are very exciting. Also things that we have been doing. So we have this wonderful project called the Welcoming Shoals Project, which is it's an exploration, and it's the beginning of a dialogue with Orthodox rabbis across North America to help us determine that if a queer person walked into their shul, how would that person feel? Would they feel welcome? Would they feel embraced? Would they be included in whatever's going on in the synagogue? Would they be able to join as members? So we have a database. We're up to 185 rabbis of congregations that we've interviewed to get a sense of where they sit on this continuum. And what ends up happening is that the interview becomes a little bit, hopefully, this is where we're hoping for, like a little bit of an aha moment for that rabbi, like, oh, I never thought of that. Or, that actually did happen to me. I wasn't quite sure what to do. What would you suggest? So it's the beginning of the conversation. And then we have people, asking us, where can I live and where will I be welcome? And so what we're discovering from that is also not so much like, is the rabbi 100%, going to be an ally to you and embrace you, but it's like the other people in the congregation or in that community, like, are they going to welcome you? And are you going to find people to have Shabbos with? And are you going to find people to actually be, there for you when you're going through all the life cycle events that you're going to go through in your life. So that's one project. Another is the High School Pledge Project, which we launched 2 summers ago now, where we got a bunch of alumni of yeshiva day schools to make a quick 30-second video saying, I went to this day school, I graduated, I wish that it had been more inclusive. So, whatever day school, take the pledge. And the pledge is a pledge of inclusion, like sort of like a list of ways that an Orthodox day school can be inclusive of their LGBTQ members. And after we launched this project, and we can't say there was like a direct cause and effect, because a lot of the day schools that then created inclusion policies, not all of them reached out to us, but we believe it was a little bit of like getting sort of like a roundabout way to reach the leaders of those institutions through their alumni. And so a bunch of them did. I would say about 10 had created policies of inclusion within several months.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really a wonderful start. And now we're starting to have, especially now when everything we're doing is virtual, to create seminars and opportunities for educators to show up even anonymously, in a Zoom meeting to sort of process how they can be there for their LGBTQ students. Students are coming out all over America earlier and earlier, younger and younger. And that's true too in the Orthodox community. And so educators are really on the front lines, and they have to actually really figure out, how are they going to take care of that student and make sure that the student isn't getting picked on and called names and misunderstood by their students, other students, and teachers. And we have guidance counselors who are really thoughtful about these things, and teachers also who love their students and want to do the best thing for them, but they just don't know how, because everything that they ever learned was that it's not normal to be gay and that it's actually a violation of the Torah. And so how do they put those two things together? And yet, they really care about their student and they feel for them. So that's another area that we work in. And, okay. The other important thing that we do, and this is like what I had learned from Avodah about community building. We have about 14 chapters across North America. And what that means is that we have people in different cities who have said, I am gay and Orthodox, or I'm a parent of an LGBTQ kid in an Orthodox community, and I need support, and I want to find others around me who also need help. So we work with those people, and they become our chapter leaders and volunteers in organizing, sometimes monthly, sometimes bi-monthly. But now with, the pandemic, everyone can meet as often as they want over Zoom without leaving their home. So the meetings are happening, some of them weekly now. And that person, or those, say 2 people, help to organize a local chapter. So they'll have social groups, and they'll have support groups, and for parents of, and also for LGBTQ people in Orthodox community. And that this initiative of having these chapters all across America is very much a foundation of Eshel. And it's the place where people meet each other and find community and find family. People really become each other's family. And it's incredibly important because for a lot of these people, their families of origin have rejected them. So they don't have the support that they need when they're going through the things that they go through in their lives. So the Eshel family, we call it the Eshel Mishpacha, really important to a lot of people. And so we invest a lot of time and effort into our volunteers. The other new, fun, and exciting thing that we're doing, which we're about to launch, I'm super excited about it, is a partnership with a dating site that is really there for queer people who are Jewish or want to date Jewish people. It's called the Yenta Over the Rainbow. And Eshel is partnering with Yenta Over the Rainbow and driving people to the site to, fill out a profile and to get into that, database so that they can be matched with people. And we're also doing this other initiative. So Eshel's doing this other sort of like another piece of this puzzle is called Soon by Q, which is a dating initiative where we're going to be running speed dating events online and having social events right now online and over Zoom and virtually to get people to, meet each other. And the reason why this is really significant and important is because this is the one thing that in the Orthodox community, when we've made a lot of headway with let's say a rabbi or a leader or a community, like in being more inclusive of LGBTQ people, we can say, we see that, kids' self-destructive behavior goes down when family and communal acceptance goes up, less depression, less suicide, happier individuals. And everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people can really get behind that. That's kind of a no-brainer. Like, yeah, we want our children to be safe and healthy and happy. But then when, and of course we're going to welcome, this person into our shul. All, a rabbi say this all the time, all Jews are welcome in my shul, and that's another little area that we have to work on, sort of like, yeah, all Jews are welcome, but like, actually, how are you broadcasting that? But once we've gotten them to that point of like, really understanding they need to be embracing, then the person wants to just live their life the way we all just want to live our lives. And for some people, that means meeting somebody and being in a relationship with them and, possibly even eventually having children. Because, Orthodox Jews, this is what we're like trained to do, and like, this is how we're like oriented. So like, when somebody comes out to themselves, they say, well, I guess I'm never going to be able to do that. Or they say, you know what, maybe I can do that, but how can I do that? So the question of how you can do that, that's sort of where we're filling in, because the Orthodox communities, that is the point at which many of them cannot go any further. Like, I've had very liberal Orthodox rabbis say to me, of course I'm going to welcome that, LGBTQ people. Of course, we're even going to make like a membership model that a couple can join, but don't ask me to say Mazel Tov from the Bima, in synagogue. Don't ask me to wish them a Mazel Tov if they get married, and don't expect me to like, have a kiddush in their honor or dance around the synagogue when they, have their first baby. Like, it's this weird point where because that is putting the, the biblical prohibition of two men having a sexual relationship together. It's like throwing it right in their face. And not only are you throwing it in their face, but you're asking to be celebrated for that. And that's how they perceive of, dating. Meanwhile, if you ask one of these rabbis, like, would you actually really be able to tell a 16-year-old that they have to live a life of celibacy? Some of them might say yes. Some of them do say yes. But when you actually play that out with them, like, what does that look like? Like, would you ever agree to be celibate for your entire life? Would you ever agree never to live with anybody or to be in a partnership with somebody? Like, when you ask them to really inhabit that space that they're asking other people to inhabit, that's when they're like, they don't really know what to do with that information. And so, so that's where they, that's sort of the growing edge, I would like to say. That's where they need to figure out then how do we guide people? And nobody's helping queer Orthodox people do that. And, nobody is institutionally celebrating that in the Orthodox community. So we know that it's really important to do that, because I think that is what makes for happier, healthier individuals. And that's what brings those people back into what is considered an important place in the Jewish community, and not to say that everybody needs to be partnered and have children. Absolutely not. That's not what that's about, but it's about, making a space for that to happen if people want that. and for holding it up and saying, this is a really important piece that the Jewish community has forgotten about for you. There is no future for an Orthodox person in Orthodoxy when they come out. And our job is to make that future and create a space, carve a path so that somebody can see a path ahead of them and say, yeah, I don't need to leave. I can stay. I can be a contributing member of the community just as I was if I was going to be straight.
What are some ways that other Jewish organizational leaders could help you with this? Like, what are ways that other people can kind of help take up this mantle and have these conversations or move the needle?
Well, I think that, in with Orthodox organizations or organizations that work with the Orthodox community, that's where we need allies. There have been some, Jewish family and children's services or federations that have constituents, that are very diverse, right? They represent or they hope to serve the entire Jewish community. And so once we, got our very first grant from the UJA Federation in New York, that to me was a sign that, they have a lot of Orthodox people that they serve, that the UJA was willing to say, like, we stand by this. This is just as important as what everybody else is doing. So that was a real, kind of a stamp of approval, but also just showing the community that we're a very diverse community and everybody needs to be included. So that was something that was a big thing for us, and it continues to be really a big thing. Good partnerships, like we love to partner with different organizations in different ways. It opens up an audience, and sort of enables people to find out about the work that we're doing. And so that's helpful. And then in funding sources, like when Eshel started, we were in a complete funding black hole. Or forget about any funding from any Orthodox, sources. There was, of course, we didn't think we would ever get funding from any place that, was focused on Orthodox community. And from the LGBT community, we didn't get funding from them either, because they were like, well, why do you have to be Orthodox? Like, why would you just leave Orthodoxy? Like, why, like, what kind of a battle are you trying to fight? It's like ridiculous. You shouldn't even be there. So we didn't know who we were going to get funding from. And over time, I think we, became clear that, that this is good for the Jewish people, like to be more open and inclusive of Orthodox queer people. It's good for everybody. And, so I guess, just to bring awareness that I would not say that we are still in a funding black hole at all. I think a lot of people have stepped forward to, and have recognized that this is an important thing and it's good for everybody. But that's just something that, it's not an obvious fit for many granting organizations and institutions. So just to kind of open up your eyes and say, yeah, this is an important thing.
It is definitely important. It has to do with individual fulfillment and safety and acceptance and what it means for the greater Orthodox community, and then beyond that, the greater Jewish community. It's incredibly powerful and very, very important.
Yeah.
Well, before we say farewell, I would love to know, is there anybody else, any other, the scope of the podcast is female, non-binary, and genderqueer Jewish leaders. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody else doing work, whether it's specifically in the LGBTQ space or just in the Jewish space in general, that you'd like to lift up, that you're feeling particularly inspired by these days.
Well, I'm feeling very inspired by this group of women that I'm a part of through the Jewish Women's Foundation of New York. it's a group of 10 of us, and the women are doing such incredible work that is so different than the work that I'm doing. And really hard. Like, I think, oh, my work, it's challenging. It's hard. It was much harder, when we started, and it's become a little bit easier. But when I hear about the work that these other women are doing, I'm completely, just in awe of what they're doing. And I won't call any of them out by name, but because they're all wonderful. So I would just really encourage people to look at the collective at the Jewish Women's Foundation, and the leaders of that organization. Jamie Allen Black is amazing, and Ruth Messenger, who is one of our mentors, have been really wonderful. There are so many people that I could, highlight, but those are the ones that come to mind right now.
That's awesome. Miriam, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing with us about your journey and your work.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share the story and what I'm up to.
Leaderfolk is all about elevating voices and starting conversations. So now we'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@tcjewfolk.com to share your thoughts, your ideas, or to nominate future guests. Leaderfolk is a project of Jewfolk Inc. and the Jewfolk Podcast Network. For more information, visit tcjewfolk.com/podcast.